right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Fearcast. I don't know why I started it with that inflection. Anyways, welcome everybody to this episode. This is the Fearcast, the podcast dedicated to OCD and anxiety spectrum disorders and getting your life back. I'm your host, Kevin Foss. I'm a licensed therapist specializing in OCD and anxiety disorders. So this is a question and answer based podcast, and we have questions today. So I'm going to be answering those questions. So I have a audio question, which if you have a question for an episode, go over to fearcastpodcast.com. You can send me a text question over there by clicking on the submit a question link. You can also send me a question over at Instagram. I am Fearcast Podcast over at Instagram, and you can send me a message over there. And that is how these messages got to me today. So there's an audio question, which audio questions go to the tippity top of the list. I've gotten a couple of audio questions in the past week or so they're going to be coming up, and I'm excited for those. So today's a fun one. Today was a complicated one. I was going through it, tried to listen to it a little bit, took a bunch of notes. So we'll see how it goes. I'm going to, as with all of these, I get these questions and I just humbly try to do my best to answer these questions. As always, as well, if I miss something, if you, the listener, feel like something else could be added, something else I missed, something else I misspoke on, or if just I'm flat out wrong on something, go to the episode page for this, message me at Fearcast Podcast, message me at the Instagram, and tell me I'm wrong. I'm happy for that, and I'll include that on a future episode. Hasn't happened yet. I'm more than happy to have that. If you think I answered it so wrong that you want to try to cancel me, you can do that as well. I'm open to the hate mail. Those are also fun to read. But don't. I don't know. But anyways, if you want to, you can also do that too. All right. So we've got, as I mentioned, 2 questions. Before I get into that, I'm just going to hope that everybody has had a good week. Hope that everybody is doing well. And man, I'm telling you, I'm looking forward to this fall thing. I know I'm talking from a northern hemisphere sort of perspective, but guess what? I'm in the northern hemisphere, and man, I'm here for the fall. I woke up this morning and it was like overcast, and like I said, I'm like, oh, it's a little soggy outside. I opened the door, I walk outside, and it's kind of drizzling, and I got legit excited. I got really excited actually because there was rain outside, like a little bit of rain, but rain. And this is from the wild weather swing from a couple weeks ago when I was complaining about it being so hot. And God, it was so hot. But now the rain. Fall's coming. It's coming for everybody. Except for you, Southern Hemisphere. Summer's coming for you. Suck it. Deal with the heat. All right, that sounded too aggressive. But anyways, things are starting weird today. All right, let's jump into it. So I have 2 things. So we're going to get into the audio questions second. I first just wanted to get into a quick text question. Somebody messaged me over at Instagram, just asked a quick little thing. They didn't leave a name. I didn't even think they wanted it for the podcast, but here we go. They said, what do you advise people who think that they might have OCD but are not diagnosed? From everything that I've read, a lot of boxes are ticked. They said parenthetically more like pure O though. End parenthetical. But with the caveat that I pretty much do have a functional life. Yes, this stuff negatively affects me emotionally, some phases more than others, but I'm able to function. As I got friends and studies and hygiene and finances, all that stuff. So they go on to say, it's pretty hard in my country to get into therapy. So, lots of O's there. What do you advise to would you advise to just assume that it could be OCD and self-help, my way to improvement? Recommended steps and resources? Thanks. Well, anonymous poster. Yeah. Self-help can be a great thing to do. So first off, something to remember. I mean, you say a lot of boxes are ticked. Okay. That just goes to show you, by the way, this is not an American messaging me. So lots of boxes ticked as opposed to checked. You're from elsewhere, and that's great. So there are a lot of resources out there, and now is the best time in history to have OCD. Now is the best time in history to have a lot of things, but now is the best time in history to have OCD because there's so many good and reliable and helpful resources out there. So some things that you can do. So, so first off, one thing you can do if you're interested, if you really, really, really want to be diagnosed, you can. You can find a therapist and you can do some of the assessment forms. So, the gold standard, I would say, for OCD assessments, and so for OCD diagnosis, is the Y box. It's the Yale Brown Obsessive Compulsive Scale, Y box. Sounds adorable, I know. I had fantasies way back in the day of going to graduate school at Yale and then to like revamp the Y box. This is so stupid. This is such a wannabe academic fantasy. But because my last name is Foss, it'd be like the Yale Foss and be the Y Fox. And I thought that'd be adorable. Anyways, I'm so glad that I did not go to onto more graduate school. I'd had enough and now I wanted to work and then start doing stuff. Anyways, here I am. You didn't ask that. So you can take the Y box, right? So the Y box is a 0 to 40 scale. I believe the number is, I'm pretty confident, is 7 and under is non-clinical. And then above that is clinical. So under that, you don't have OCD. Above that, you got OCD. But here's the thing. You can rate on the scale and not, quote, have OCD. So you can have a lot of symptoms. You can have some symptoms, I suppose, of OCD, but not have a clinical level. Now, the Y box can be really helpful in terms of diagnosis. Certainly, it's necessary for formal diagnosis. But I find it's more helpful in terms of trying to gauge progress for somebody. So we can do the Y box at the beginning of treatment, see what their number is, do a bunch of treatment. A month later, 2 months later, do the Y box again, see how that number has changed, and it's a fun, helpful little benchmark that can be really encouraging to say, like, man, my number is coming down. That's fantastic. Now, there are also a lot of other scales. There can be, and this has a bunch of different names out there. I'm forgetting the name of the book that has it. I think, what book is that? I think Jonathan Grayson's book has an assessment in it, and there are a lot of other symptom checklists that you can do. They're not necessarily going to say you indeed have OCD, but they're going to kind of give you some things to think about and give you some directions to go in terms of ways that you can start maybe thinking about where OCD may be attacking you. You messaged me, though. I'm willing to bet you've already got some ideas, but you said things are working pretty well for your life. So what can you do? If things are not significantly impaired in your life, then you can kind of keep living life. But I would encourage you to, and I think this is pretty much for everybody, you can start taking notes of where OCD, let's just call it OCD for funsies. Let's say OCD is impacting your life. In what way is it impacting your life? Then you can start to do a lot of the stuff that we're talking about here on this podcast, a lot of the stuff that's going to be talked about in those books, in terms of facing those fears. If your anxiety or something in your mind or something within your obsessive or doubt says don't do X, do X. If it says you have to do Y, don't do Y, right? Push against it, see what happens. Do the thing that makes you feel uncomfortable. What that does is it shows you that you can do this and that this thing is not off limits. And I was talking with a client earlier this week about this. It's like this can be applied to everybody, OCD or not, anxiety or not. And I think that we should be doing this as people. Find out what makes us nervous or scared, or it feels like our obstacles, and go do it. What's the worst that happens? You find out that you can do it. You find out that it wasn't as scary as you thought. You find out that you have a new horizon in your life. It doesn't mean that now that has to be your favorite thing or that you love it or want to do it or want to incorporate it into your life on a regular basis, but you can say, but I can now. And that's an option. It gives you freedom. So that's where I would say, and self-help options, there are certainly programs out there. I know Nathan Peterson has one. I know that Kimberly Quinlan has one. They cost a bit of money, a couple of $100, but you can go online, buy these programs, and it is a self-help program to help you go through the whole system of OCD treatment. And if finding therapy is tough in your country, that may be a really good option. Granted, they are in English. I don't know if they are translated into other languages, but if you're listening to this podcast, anybody out there, there is a really good chance that you speak English. If you are listening to this and you don't speak English, this podcast sucks for you. I'm sorry. However, if you do speak English, those programs might be really helpful, as well as any number of books, workbooks out there. If your life is working, great. All this is going to do is going to give you more stuff to do, more stuff to think about, and it's just going to lead to improvement. So try some of those things out. So I would say, again, in order, try a workbook, try just information about OCD, reading more about pure O-related things, podcasts about it as well. Challenging yourself, pushing yourself then into areas where you feel there are obstacles or there are hiccups or there are perceived threats, and see how it goes. Right. And then, lastly, if you really want to get into it, find a online program that you would be willing to do and to go through it and kind of see where it pushes you and challenges you. And if worse comes to worse, there are therapy options out there online. I believe NoCD has therapists working in pretty much every country. They do accept insurance, so that may be an option for you too. So keep pushing, keep looking, and hopefully that can all help. So that is what I have to say about that. Now I want to get on to the main question of the week. So I'll play the audio, and then they emailed me as well and had a couple of little things as well to add, and I will read those afterward.
Hey, Kevin. Thank you so much for your podcast. I've listened to quite a few of your episodes. So I've been thinking that I have relationship OCD for a bit. I'm seeing a therapist right now, and I've brought it up to her, and she doesn't seem to think I have it. But I do definitely feel like some of my behaviors are compulsions, and definitely I feel like I have the urge to, get an answer. And, the urgency is just like really intense whenever I have, something come up that triggers me. So anyways, what makes this confusing is the fact that in my previous marriage, which was about 10, 11 years, I remember feeling like something was off pretty much the entire time. And there was definitely some lying about pornography as well as like spending money. There was some gaslighting as well. And, I definitely got obsessed with self-help books, and they helped out a lot to the point where eventually I realized it wasn't a healthy relationship. But the fact is, no matter what, there was an underlying nagging feeling like he was hiding things from me. And most of the time, whenever I would look for stuff, I would find it. But there were times, obviously, that I looked for things and I didn't find it, which obviously makes it confusing, if you're not finding something every single time. But even my ex would tell me, like, hey, how do you always seem to know? And it was like this belief that I had this gut instinct and intuition that was mostly true. Well, anyways, long story short, we divorced, and then a few years after that, he came out as being transgender. And that really shook me. But at the same time, looking back, obviously, I can see some signs, things that I had questioned him about both early on and much later in the marriage. And it was definitely confirming for me, for him to come out as transgender. So here I am now in a new relationship. I've been in this new relationship for 6.5 years. It's always been kind of shaky. Again, still having a lot of trust issues, much less gaslighting, but it has happened a couple times at least, and maybe more than a couple times. But he's real closed off. And so I've had a hard time kind of figuring out if he's hiding anything. And I'm having those same fears, which just got worse. I guess this was about a year and a half ago when I was looking at his phone, which I know we're not supposed to do, but I just can't help myself. So I snoop it on his phone, and I look at Google Play and see that he had searched for a gay dating app. And when I saw it, I didn't think really much of it. So I brought it up to him, I feel like in a very non-accusatory way, and he said he had no idea what that was about, which then, red flags. So I start searching more, and little by little more answers are coming out from him, and it's just something he did to play a joke on me because he knows I snoop on his phone. And then come to find out years ago, he looked at that kind of app. It's kind of vague, but I guess he was bored. It was back when he was single, and he would get on there occasionally and then delete it and, just chat with people, nothing sexual. He says he's not gay. He says he's not bi. He says he's not curious. It was just something from the past, which is hard for me to accept given my past. So, given that I felt caught off guard with my ex coming out as transgender, but like I said, always kind of feeling like there was something there, and, definitely snooping on my ex. I didn't think if I asked him straight up, he would tell me the truth. I'm doing the same thing in this relationship, just checking all the time and, just trying to see if there's something going on, and just really reading all of the behavior. Is he attracted to me? How often are we having sex? The way he looks at me when he doesn't touch me, things like that. And just really obsessing over every little thing in the relationship, trying to tell if he is like secretly gay and in denial about it. And sometimes it takes up a lot of my day, and sometimes it's really, really bad. So pretty much my question is, how do I differentiate between, gut instincts versus OCD? How do I know when, it's something that is legitimate that I should look at versus, maybe a hang up from my past, or, just something else, because it's just so hard to differentiate. And I feel like, even though it's been a year and a half since this came up with my current boyfriend, I'm still regularly triggered and, trying to figure it out. So hopefully you can give me some help on differentiating this. Thank you.
All right. So that question comes from Doubting Debbie. I didn't mention that at the front end. So she wants to go by Doubting Debbie. Now, she gave me a bunch of options, and I'm picking Doubting Debbie because I didn't want to pick Suspicious Sarah. I didn't want to pick Suspicious Sarah because there's a lot of S's in there. And fun fact, so way back in the day in elementary school, I used to have a lisp. So I went through speech therapy when I was in elementary school to kind of fix that. So I can now say my S's correctly. Prior to that, it would have been Suspicious Sarah, which doesn't sound great, which is even worse because my name is Kevin Foth, and that also sounds a little odd. So Suspicious Sarah, you shall not be. Doubting Debbie, definitely. So we're going with that. All right. So I first want to just start this off, Doubting Debbie. You've been through a lot. It sounds like there's been a lot of stress, a lot of questioning, a lot of doubts, and a lot of change in your life, right? From your past husband to the lying and the gaslighting. I think a lot of that for a lot of people would lead to a tremendous amount of self-doubt and questioning. That if you are experiencing OCD, and regardless of relationship OCD, for OCD, it's going to create this kind of narrative that you can't trust yourself, you can't trust your instincts, you can't trust your thoughts, and that's rife for outsourcing that to compulsive behavior or compulsive thinking. So you've been through a lot. So I have a bunch of notes, and I'm actually going to instead answer it backwards from what my notes are. So I'm going to first start with your question. So your ultimate question was, how do I differentiate between my gut and OCD? And how do I differentiate between something that's legit that I should look into, or is this just your hang up? So this is a great question. And so, all the other themes aside, I talk about this with folks a lot. And how do you differentiate these two things? So how do you differentiate between your gut and your OCD, or something that's legit, or just, something that gets stuck in your craw? So the reality is it can be both. Both things can be true here, that you can have a gut feeling and you can have something that could be looked into, and it can be something that OCD is grabbing onto. So gut feel. So hopefully to add more confusion, hopefully that wasn't too confusing. I'll try to explain it, and I'll yammer on a lot. So gut feelings exist for a reason. So there's a sense that we get where we have these, suspicions or these nagging feelings or this kind of inkling, right? All those words to describe this sense that something's off or wrong or potentially dangerous or something we should look out for, right? Now that feeling can be helpful. And I'm sure every single person out there has a story where they said, something didn't quite feel right, and they did something about it and they were right. Now, of course, everybody else there also probably has a situation where they said, something doesn't feel right, and things were fine, and it ended up being fine, and it was them just, their crazy brain going crazy, right? So I think gut feelings can be good and helpful, but they also need to be tempered with our logic and reason. That's why our logic and reason exists for a good reason, right? So in this, we want to then say, how do we balance those two, right? Our gut feeling will absolutely be affected by our past experiences, our upbringing, cultural norms and expectations, religious history. Like it can be affected by a lot of stuff, superstition, cultural superstitions, right? So all of that will impact that. So, but I would say kind of in your situation, given your history, and then, given your previous husband and then your current boyfriend, it would be no surprise that your gut is sounding an alarm, right? It's saying something is fishy here. Something is questionable here. But just because something feels questionable doesn't mean that it is in fact bad or dangerous or off, or that questionable thing is absolutely right. It's just kind of raising an alarm. Right. This is side note. This is where I go like, all right, with people say like, oh, you got to trust your gut. No, we should not trust our gut all the time for all things. If we simply trusted our gut, quote unquote, and then all the other phrases and pithy sayings that are similar to that, it's probably going to get us in a lot of weird places and make us do a lot of very weird and unwanted things. Okay, so it's sounding the alarm for you, but you also have his words, and you've also talked about you have a tendency to ruminate and doubt, right? So that's what we're kind of balancing this with. One thing I would encourage you to do is to gently catch yourself with your rumination and bring yourself back to the present, or a present state of not knowing and relying on what you know, all right? So you've asked him. You've already asked him all these questions. Now I'm going to get into this in more detail a little bit later. But when you have a doubt, we've talked about natural doubt and obsessive doubt, right? Natural doubt is when we have a question that we don't have the answer to. And the way that we get that answer is by asking the question or looking something up. It's natural. So, who's the pitcher for the 1975 Red Sox? I don't know. I'll never know unless I look it up. There's no amount of my thinking about it that's going to produce this, because I simply don't have that answer. Now, if I look it up, well, I'll have that answer. Now, once I then go, I have the answer, I'm going to move forward with this as if it's true. But then my brain goes, are you sure? Maybe that's wrong. Maybe I should read it again. Maybe I should find a different website because that might have the real answer and the thing I just read was false. And then I look it up again and, well, it's the same thing, but maybe they're both wrong. Maybe I should just keep looking, right? Notice that I'm doubting what I've looked up, doubted what I've seen, doubting the source, and it starts getting me into this rabbit hole of continued doubt, right? But I've already looked it up and I've gotten my information. Doubting Debbie, rumination here is not going to provide you any more information than what you already have. He's already given you his answer. If anything, rumination, checking, continual going with the doubting is going to lead you into more doubt and is probably going to make things worse. The only way to put this question to bed, the only way to kind of to get the answer you have or the only way to get the answer that you could get to is to ask him again. But you've already done that, right? So all you can go on is what he says. You're not psychic. You can't read his mind. You can't predict what's going to happen. We have to go with what he says. But your gut is saying something else. Now, so I want to give an example of kind of how rumination ultimately isn't really going to give you any further answers. So let's say ruminating about the frequency of sex, right? This happens a lot for folks with relationship OCD, right? How much sex are we having? How much sex should we be having? What's the average amount of sex that people have? Should we, like, if we have sex more or if we have sex less, what sort of impact will that have on my relationship? All right. So let's say, it's ruminating about it is only going to give the obsession, or it's never going to, excuse me. This is the result of me again having too much coffee. So ruminating about these things is only going to give into the obsession and will never give a non-anxious conclusion. I think something we find when we're ruminating is that it oftentimes just goes into more and more doubt, more and more obsession, more and more anxiety. Rumination rarely gives satisfaction and comfort and peace because naturally your brain is just going to keep coming up with more and more questions. It has these yeah buts and what ifs and what else. Right? It has these caveats it wants to add on. I'll give you an example. So, you can have sex one time a month and your brain might go, he doesn't want to have sex with me because he's gay, for sure. Right? So then you're ruminating about how the frequency and it's not having enough. Well, the brain says, well, it's because, he's gay. He doesn't want to have sex with me. He wants to have sex with men. Well, it could just be his libido. It could be stress. It could be a lot of things, but it's rarely going to go to those. It's going to go to this feared thing. All right, let's say you're having sex 5 times a day. Your brain might still say, well, we have sex all the time, but he's probably thinking about dudes. Right? It doesn't say we've got this vibrant sex life. It doesn't say that, we have wonderful sex or constant sex and the opposite of not having enough sex, right? It's still going to find this problem because it's asking this what if and this undermining type of question, right? So to the point about rumination not helping, because we're not getting more information, we're just going back and back over the same information. The only way to get new information is to seek new information. Right? So the reality is you two have the sex at the frequency that you have it. If you would like to have more sex or less sex, that is subject to conversation and working it out as a relationship, as a standard thing that couples will eventually talk about is, are we having too much sex, not enough sex? Do we want to be having sex in different types of ways? Like all those questions, right? As you could have with, are we going on vacation enough? Are we spending enough quality time together? Do we hold hands too much? Do we not hold hands enough? Do we say I love you too much? Does that thing I do? You get the idea, right? So you've heard me say this before. Relationship OCD is kind of a combination of regular old relationship stuff responded to with OCD, or regular relationship stuff attacked by OCD. So we can look at the way that OCD is present, and we can start pulling back on those compulsions and tolerating the anxiety of not knowing the answer and being vulnerable to the consequence to it, while also addressing things within the relationship that may need to be addressed, right? And that may be the frequency of sex. That may be the time that you spend together. That may be the types of conversations that you have. And those are things that we typically would work out in relationships and have conversations about and maybe find a common ground for, or maybe just kind of fight about it, right? But those are stuff that is worked out commonly within relationships. But OCD is going to jump in and make all these wild assumptions and respond to with rumination and checking and other compulsive behaviors, right? So when the question arises, what I would encourage you to do is to acknowledge the question and acknowledge the feared outcome. So we've talked about non-engagement responses before. Non-engagement response is a way of acknowledging the thought, acknowledging the doubt, acknowledging the worry, and disengaging from it. So it sounds like an oxymoron to say a non-engagement response. Are you engaging with it with a response? Yes, it's just the term that they're called. Anyways, the point is to say, like, all right, I see you thought. We're not going to pretend like it's not there, like everything's fine. He's definitely not on those apps, right? But it's say, all right, I have this thought. I have this question. I have this doubt. Okay, I see it. And we can then say, we can acknowledge a couple things. We can say how it makes you feel. Man, that thought makes me feel really uncomfortable, which it does. That thought makes you feel uncomfortable, but period. There's no reason to change it. There's no reason to fight against that. It does make you feel uncomfortable, but ruminating about it, checking about it, only makes you feel worse. So we're going to acknowledge that we have that feeling, and then we're going to try to shift and move on to something else. We're going to let go of the attention and the effort paid to that feeling. We can acknowledge the potential outcome and how scary and how much that would suck. Right? We can say, oh, man, that would suck. Man, wouldn't that be awful if this was just like that other relationship, just like my previous husband, that he turned out trans? What if my current boyfriend is indeed gay or bi or something other than what I suspect or something other than he says? Oh, my goodness, what if I can't trust myself? What if I can't trust my feeler? What if I can't trust my picker? Yeah, that would suck. It would. But engaging with that further is only going to result in more anxiety. It isn't going to provide satisfaction and security. So we're trying to do more of what's helpful and less of what's unhelpful. And rumination and doubt, engagement with doubt is unhelpful. So we're going to acknowledge it and keep moving, trusting the information that you have, right? When I said embracing a state of not knowing while trusting what you know. He has given you an answer, so we take that answer, we move forward with the best information that we have, and we hope for the best. And we wait for more information. He'll tell you, or he won't, but more information will either come out or it won't. And we wait, and we have a relationship, and we try to focus on how to make this relationship that you're in the best possible relationship that you can. And we wait for more information. And what if no more information ever comes? Was the rumination worth it? Was the checking worth it? Was the snooping worth it? Right? So we re-engage and try to make the best relationship that we can with what we have. And that can feel uncomfortable. Now, I will answer from a different perspective as well. So let's jump into this. So sexuality is complicated. Like, no one's surprised with my saying that. Sexuality is complicated, and it's just fraught with guilt and shame and religious and cultural pressures and family narratives, and all of that plays a role in how sexuality is developed, and people come to their sexuality in all manner of ways. Now, when I say sexuality, I'm speaking about that very, very broadly. This isn't the binary of straight and gay, or the tertiary of straight, gay, bisexual, and then anything else in between and outside of and on top of and underneath of and in quantum space to the left of. We come to it in all manner of ways, and this can also include just things that we're into, rather than just being that quote, that straight box or that gay box and all the things that are within it, right? People come to who it is that they are and what they're into in very complicated and mysterious ways. Right? So your current boyfriend, when you asked him, he says, no, I am not gay or bisexual or trans or a flamingo or anything else in between. He says he is straight. Okay. But you keep finding the apps. And he has found the apps. Oh, man, I realized I forgot to read the other thing. Let me do that. All right, I'm going to find it. All right, here it is. I'll try to read it quick. All right, so she goes on to say, all right. She says, also just to clarify a bit, the behaviors that I feel like are probably compulsions would be snooping on his phone, yes. Looking at the camera we have set up in the living room on the days off because when he has downloaded the app, it was on a day off when I was at work, yes, compulsion. Looking at the Life 360 app to see where he is, compulsive. And twice now, I've downloaded the same app, whatever it is. So she doesn't say what app it is, but it doesn't matter. So downloaded the same app to ask people on there if they had ever met straight men who just want to chat in a platonic way. Compulsion. I've also gotten on the app to check if there are any profiles near where he is that could be him. Oh, and checking his facial expressions and reactions if anything gay ever comes up. I've questioned him a bit, or questioned him a few times as well. I just never get to feel peace about it because you won't. Checking won't. All right. She goes on to say, I just never seem to feel. Oh, I already read that. And one day when I checked the app, it said that there was someone 1 feet away. Bah, 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 and we were home together. Bah, bah, wow. And so were the kids. I don't know what to do with that. And then I confronted him, and he immediately handed me his phone and said there was nothing. So I asked, and then she asked the kids, and she said they're teenagers and they haven't had it either. And then she says, and then it turns out the location is within the 300 feet distance, so it could have been a neighbor. But yeah, it led me to check on the distance of my distance on profiles for a few days until it was settled in my head how the distance feature worked. Okay, thank you. All right, and she goes on to say, all right. So first off, doubting David, I just want to point out, you had an inkling, you had a suspicion, you had a question. It turned out to be nothing in this. Now, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of yeah buts and a lot of possibilities, but there's a lot of compulsion in there that needs to be pulled back on. All right, now let me get back on track with the regularly scheduled notes that I have. All right, let's get on track. Okay, he said that you found the apps, and he said there was a time in his life when he downloaded the apps just to chat with people. Okay, maybe that's true. Now, there's something about the app that serves as a draw to him, one way or another. So when we're kind of discovering our sexuality and what we're into, we see something or we hear something or something kind of piques our interest. And so we try something, or we kind of engage in a thought, or we read something, we watch something. And when we do that, sometimes we go, I didn't mind that. That wasn't that bad. I want to try it again. Or maybe that's something that is fun or interesting or appealing. Sometimes you go, oh, while it felt appealing, while it thought was appealing, in practice it was not, and I do not want to do that again. It also happens. But there can be a difference between what happens between our ears and what we do in real life, right? So for him, there may be, I'm not saying there is, because I didn't chat with him, I didn't chat with you. There may be something about the apps or something about the thought of it that may be appealing. Now, I know there are also people out there yelling at me saying, aren't you giving in to the obsession? Maybe, but I'm also offering an alternative, and I'm building to something, I promise. So there could be something going on in his mind that he is indeed downloading these apps, but he also may be then experiencing some shame or this pull away or an active suppression, right? Or there's some kind of ambivalence to maybe owning this as a reality, right? There's a ton of reasons why somebody may be interested in one thing or something sounds sexy or a turn on that they go, oh, that's not something that I should be interested in or could be interested in, because that may receive some judgment or some pushback or some criticism or some condemnation, right? And some of these things may be very innocuous, right? So let's say he's not gay, but what if it's a kink? What if it's something that works in his erotic imagination, whatever it might be? There's something within that that was appealing or a pull that he may want to pursue, or he may just want to leave that just as is and not talk about or do anything about it or include that in his life in practicality, in reality. But there's something about it that between his ears, it is fun or interesting or sexy. Or he's writing a sociological report on the behaviors and communication patterns of gay app culture, right? You never really said kind of what that app is. Who knows what it is? I don't know if it's like, Grindr or Recon or Scruff or who knows what it is, right? It could be anything. But you've downloaded the app. There's something about it that does it for him, potentially, or at least it had been, or at least in part. So what do we do with that? You asked him and he went, nope, I'm fine. Not for me. That was back then. It could be. So if we trust him at his word, we have to say maybe it's nothing, right? Ostensibly, he's into you. Ostensibly, he likes you and he wants you and he's attracted to you and he wants to have sex with you. Okay. But then you have this question and this doubt. So what can you do? Well, you can be an ally. You can be supportive of him, and you can be open. You can be encouraging. You can be a soft place to land and a supportive person to talk to. If there is something that he says, or something that he makes a reference to, or something that he acknowledges, rather than going, that's not okay, that's wrong, or why would you think that? Tell me more about that. That's cool. Tell me more. Oh, I haven't thought about that. What do you think about that? Right? You can earn his trust through not judging him for his thoughts or his feelings, and be an encourager for who he is, right? Now, I don't know exactly where that will go, and neither do you, and that's the fun of uncertainty. But I'm encouraging you to lean into this as a possibility and just say, maybe this is a thing that plays out in his mind, and he may not be, let's say it's just a story that's playing out his mind that kind of gets his engines going. Okay. Can he have it? If it has no impact on your life, can he have it? Maybe. But we also sit with that possibility that, man, if it is the worst fear, it could change things, and it could change your life, and it could change your relationship, and it would make you doubt yourself all over again, like you had. And that would suck. And doubting Debbie, I don't want that to happen to you, but we don't know. But he's given you an answer, and now we move forward with it. And we see where it goes, because there's nothing to do. But we do know that rumination and snooping and questioning is driving you nuts, and certainly isn't helping anything. So I know there's a lot of different avenues with that, a lot of different things to consider. So I hope you're processing these with your therapist. It sounds like you kind of are. But yeah, I really appreciate this question. And I appreciate your trust in me to answer this question or to give it a go. So, as I've said at the very top of this, and again, I've said this before that I always feel sheepish answering these questions because I am not in the LGBTQ plus IA LMNOQ community, and I appreciate the trust and the hope that perhaps I could help or point someone in the right direction. But if I messed something up, if I misspoke, if I did something wrong in that, let me know. I'll include that in a future episode and try to clarify this as best I possibly can. But Doubting Debbie, I hope this points you in the right direction or points you in a helpful direction. So until then, best of luck. Thank you for listening to the Fearcast. If you would like your question answered on a future episode, please click on the Submit a Question link at fearcastpodcast.com. If you would like your question answered sooner, please send me a recording of your question to questions@fearcastpodcast.com, or by sending me an audio message through Instagram by DMing me at fearcastpodcast on Instagram. If you like the Fearcast, please write a review on your podcast platform of choice. Please remember that the Fearcast is not a substitute for psychotherapy. If you need a little bit of help in your recovery, please go over to fearcastpodcast.com and click on the Find Help link, and there's going to be some information for you there. So until next time, take a risk, challenge yourself, and don't take your brain too seriously.